Hi guys, Mrs. Morseman here. In this video, I'm going to take you through some important things that you want to know for the Math Aspire test. So you might first be wondering, or thinking, I don't really care so much about the Math Aspire. I understand that, but I'm just going to tell you some of the things that I'm going to share in this video you're really going to want to pay close attention to because it can help you raise your Aspire score. And you may wonder, well, why do I want to raise my Aspire score? So some of you may or may not have heard, but we are planning on offering some personal days for students next year based off of how they perform on the Aspire test. So if you score ready or exceeding on tests and or show growth from last year, then you have the opportunity to earn up to 2 personal days, one for the fall and one for the spring. So that means if you get a good score on your Aspire test, that means that you could have some extra days off school that don't count towards like the number of days that you can have so that you don't have to take finals. So that's pretty cool. This is the first year we've offered it, and so it's a great opportunity for you guys. So what I'm going to start with talking about is just some overall information about the math test. Some of you guys probably remember or know a lot of this information, but it's good just to refresh. You're going to see about 48 to 50 questions on the Math Aspire test, and you're going to have 75 minutes. It is the longest test of all of them. The 75 minutes breaks down to about 1.5 minutes per question. So if you were to spend the same amount of time on each question, that's not a whole lot of time. So you do have to move through kind of quickly. Most questions are going to be multiple choice or your drag and drop type. The technology enhanced is what they call it. Just things that can be easily scored by a computer. Just cut and dry right or wrong answers. The questions that you're going to be asked might cover Algebra 1, some statistics, that's like mean, median, mode, histograms, that kind of stuff, geometry, functions, modeling, and things you learn in middle school and elementary school. So from those 48 to 50 questions, 3 of them are going to be what we call constructed response. So the rest of this slide deck and this video is all going to be about the constructed response because it is a huge portion of the test. So 3 questions, each one is worth 4 points, so a total of 12 points just for constructed response. But those 3 questions are worth 24% of your overall score. That basically means a quarter of your overall score just comes from those 3 questions. That's a big deal. Good news is you do not have to get the questions completely right to get some points. So you can get partial credit for these. It's not just cut and dry, right or wrong. One question of the 3 are going to be on either Algebra 1 or geometry concepts. Now my guess is it's probably going to be over Algebra 1 because they know if you're in 9th grade, some of you, most of you, may not have had geometry in high school. But there's going to be 2 questions on what you've learned in lower grades. So you can probably be guaranteed a question over geometry. It just might be stuff that you learned in middle school. Now, if you remember, 12 points for the constructed response, that's 4 points per question. If you just get half of those 12 points, so 6 points, you will score ready on this particular section of the math test. Not the whole math test, you still have to work on those other questions. But getting half of the points is going to be a strong score. Now, most of you know, when you're doing this question on the Aspire, because most of you have done it before in years past, the only thing that you have to use is your keyboard. There's no equation editor, there's no graphing tool, so you really have to use words to explain the calculations, the steps, if you graphed something, what your graph looks like. You have to use your words to explain. So when you get a score out of 4, that score comes from two things. One, is your answer correct, or did you answer it completely? And then secondly, how thoroughly did you explain and support your reasoning? This second bullet here, how you explain and support your reasoning, that is the most important piece that I'm going to talk about in the rest of this video, because that's something that you're starting to practice in your classes, but it may not be something that you feel totally confident about yet. So, what all of that overall information means is that if you get the question right and just say your answer, you're not going to get full points. Also, flip side means just writing a lot of words or restating the problem, like copying words from the problem, is not going to get you full points either. You have to do a combination of those two things. So let's talk about some ways that you get points. What I would call easy points is by including any of the following in your answer. If you have a question, the question that you're asked, and you provide an example, so say it's a question where you have to write an equation or you have to do something with an equation. If you give an example of, say, when x equals 2, then the equation equals 15. That can get you some points. Stating a definition, a theorem, a formula, a property. So say it's a question involving rectangles. If you say, for example, a rectangle is a four-sided figure with all four angles being right angles, and the question involves rectangles, then boom, you've at least got a point. Or if you state one or more steps in a procedure. So say you're working the problem out and you have to say add 15 and 20 together to get 35. If you explain in your problem, I added 15 and 20 and got 35, that's stating a step in your process. Or you might have a question where it's asking you to look at sample student work. So you've probably seen these types of questions where it says, Abby says the answer is blank, Rick says the answer is blank, which one is correct and why? If you just say that one of them made an error and that's correct, like so say it's Abby that made the error and you said Abby made a mistake, just saying that is going to get you a point. So good news is there are some easy ways that you can get at least a point for these questions. There is no reason to leave these blank. Even if you feel overwhelmed and you're not quite sure how to work the problem completely, find something that you can state about the problem that's true and you'll get at least a point. Now, if you want to do something more than that, basically, if you state something that's true and then use that in support of your answer, that's going to be worth more. So the first one, make one true statement about the problem or question and use that in support of your answer. That's a good just blanket that kind of encompasses how you can get more points. But some other things to think about. If you use an if-then statement to support your answer, so an example would be, if the figure is a rectangle, then all angles are 90 degrees. And that allows me to set up this equation, blah, 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 blah. So if you go from there, that's worth more points. If you remember in the last slide I said that if you just indicate or if you just say that an error occurred in someone's work, that's worth a point. But if you say that an error occurred and then say why it occurred, that gets you more points. Another way is to provide a counterexample. Now, a counterexample is giving an example that proves the problem wrong or proves the problem or shows the problem wrong. So that would be, let's say you're working a problem and, well, it's hard to come up with one on the fly, but a counterexample is just showing the person who's reading the problem that you can think of a case where things are not true. and then you show how that connects to your answer in the problem. Now this last one is a little bit wordy. So say it's a geometry question. Say you're talking about a triangle. Say it ends up being an isosceles triangle. If you list the reasons or the characteristics of an isosceles triangle, that we have two congruent sides, base angles are congruent, those kinds of things, and use that in support of your answer, that'll get you more points. The big daddy points are if you use multiple statements, multiple true things to support your answer. So if you're working a problem and you say multiple things that are true, you give an example, you provide multiple explanations of the steps in your process. Say you're calculating, you're having to crunch some numbers, so you explain all of your steps and how that helps you get to your answer, you will get full points. So yes, this takes a lot of work and a lot of words to do this well, but that's what you have to do in order to get full points. So let's talk strategies. Overall on the test, you want to use your scratch paper. Don't do all the work in your head. I know a lot of you guys don't like to write things down. I don't really know why that is, but try to use your scratch paper. Because when you're in a testing situation and maybe you're a little bit more stressed, you're feeling the time crunch, it's not really your normal routine, you might make some silly mistakes in your head that could be avoided by just writing a couple things down on your paper. Now with the calculator, you're going to have one for the test, both a digital one on the testing portal and a handheld calculator like the ones that you use in your class. Use it to your heart's content, but use it carefully. Make sure you're typing things in correctly. A silly mistake is just going too fast and doing, say, typing in 2 when you needed to type in -2. Also use the full time. When you're done, you can go back and look at any question. Check over your work before you submit the test. Now, since you only need 6 out of the 12 points to score ready, some strategies to consider. You could pick one of the constructed response questions to answer fully, to do your very best work, very best effort in answering it correctly, completely, and providing multiple statements that support your answer. And then give minimal answers for the other 2. Hard thing is it's not going to tell you that questions, say 21, 35, and 42 are the constructed response questions. You're going to actually have to move through the test to find them. But remember, you can always go back to questions. You can also, on the testing portal, you can flag questions. So, one strategy would be to find the constructed response question that you feel the most confident about and spend your time on that question, and then with the others, read it quickly and answer it and maybe give one support. So that's one strategy. Or the other is to try and answer each question correctly and give minimal support. So if you get one question, 4 points, and then the other 2 questions answered so that you at least get 1 point for each of those, there's your 6 points to score ready. Or if you do each question where you answer it correctly but give minimal support to your answer, that could maybe be worth 2 points each question to get your 6. In the next video, we're going to talk through some examples.